Hey baby, what are you doing up? Can't sleep, huh? Oh, I'm not really doing anything. Just reading a bit before I head to bed. Did you... You can come cuddle up with me if you want. Yeah, of course. I can read to you if that helps. Bore you to sleep with the sound of my voice. I'm just kidding. Kinda, anyway. Ow! Okay. I'm joking, jeez. What is it with you and pinching? I mean, yeah, that's fair enough, I guess. Anyways, you all comfy? Yeah. Yeah, I'll move. Hang on. There you go. I guess I will start reading then. Nah, I will... I mean, it's about quantum physics, which will definitely put you to sleep. So, like, I don't want to... What are the words I'm trying to say? I don't want to pick up where I was just reading, because it will make absolutely no sense. And also the beginning bit is kind of funny, like the introduction. So I think I'll just start there, you know? I think that would be a good idea. Okay, before I start, may I have a kiss? For motivation purposes, reading is very hard. Thank you. I know I said a kiss, but I stole two. What are you gonna do about it? Exactly. Okay. God, no, this author is... I love him. Adam Becker, I think he's a scientist. Or a quantum physicist. That would make sense. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, he's really cool, and he has a really nice voice. He was in a podcast I was listening to. Yeah, okay. I apologise if I stutter, but you should be used to that. The objects in our everyday lives have an annoying inability to appear in two places at once. Leave your keys in your jacket and they won't also be on the hook by your front door. This isn't surprising. These objects have no uncharted abilities or virtues. They're profoundly ordinary, yet these mundane things are composed of a galaxy of the unfamiliar. Your house keys are a temporary alliance of a trillion atoms, each forged in a dying star eons ago, each falling to earth in its earliest days. They have bathed in the light of a violent young sun. They have witnessed the entire history of life on our planet. Atoms are epic. No, that is genuinely an actual line, that's not just me. Like most epic heroes, atoms have some problems that ordinary humans don't. We are creatures of habit, monotonously persisting in just one location at a time. But atoms are prone to whimsy. A single atom wandering down a path in a laboratory encounters a fork where it can go left or right. Rather than choosing one way forward, as you or I would have to do, the atom suffers a crisis of indecision over where to be and where not to be. Ultimately, our enemy to Hamlet chooses both. The atom doesn't split, it doesn't take one path and then the other, it travels down both paths simultaneously, thumbing its nose at the laws of logic. The rules that apply to you and me and Danish princes don't apply to atoms. They live in a different world, governed by a different physics. The submicroscopic world of the quantum. Quantum physics, the physics of atoms and other ultra-tiny objects, like molecules and subatomic particles, is the most successful theory in all of science. It predicts a stunning variety of phenomena to an extraordinary degree of accuracy, and its impact goes well beyond the world of the very small and into our everyday lives. The discovery of quantum physics in the early 20th century led directly to the silicon transistors buried in your phone and the LEDs in its screen, the nuclear hearts of the most distant space probes, and the lasers in the supermarket checkout scanner. Quantum physics explains why the sun shines and how your eyes can see. It explains the entire discipline of chemistry, periodic table and all. It even explains how things stay solid, like the chair you're sitting in, or your own bones and skin. All of this comes down to very tiny objects behaving in very odd ways. But there's something troubling here. Quantum physics doesn't seem to apply to humans, or to anything at human scale. Our world is a world of people and keys and other ordinary things that can travel down only one path at a time. Yet all the mundane things in the world around us are made of atoms, including you, me, and Danish princes. And those atoms certainly are governed by quantum physics. So, how can the physics of atoms differ so wildly from the physics of our world made of atoms? Why is quantum physics only the physics of the ultra-tiny? The problem isn't that quantum physics is weird. The world is a wild and woolly place, with plenty of room for weirdness. But we definitely don't see all the strange effects of quantum physics in our daily lives. Why not? Maybe quantum physics really is only the physics of tiny things, and it doesn't apply to large objects. Perhaps there's a boundary somewhere, a border beyond which quantum physics doesn't work. In that case, where is the boundary, and how does it work? And if there is no such boundary, if quantum physics really applies to us just as much as it applies to atoms and subatomic particles, then why does quantum physics so flagrantly contradict our experience of the world? Why aren't our keys ever in two places at once? That'd be kind of handy, wouldn't it? Yeah, if our keys could exist in multiple places, so we'd never lose them. Yeah, basically, so I'd never get locked out of our house again. Yep, you're right, you've got me there. You doing okay? Good. 80 years ago, one of the founders of quantum physics, Erwin Schrödinger, God, I can never get his surname right, Schrödinger, was deeply troubled by these problems. To explain his concerns to colleagues, he devised a now famous thought experiment, Schrödinger's cat. Schrödinger imagined putting a cat in a box along with a sealed glass vial of cyanide, with a hammer hanging over the vial. Lovely. The hammer, in turn, would be connected to a Geiger counter, which detects radioactivity, and that counter would be pointed at a tiny lump of slightly radioactive metal. This Rube Goldberg contraption would be set off the moment the metal emitted any radiation. Once that happens, the Geiger counter would register the radiation, which would release the hammer, smashing the vial and killing the cat. Schrödinger had no intention of actually conducting this experiment, to the SPCA's relief. Schrödinger proposed leaving the cat in the box for a certain period of time, then opening the box to find the cat's fate. The radiation emitted by the lump of metal is composed of subatomic particles, breaking away from the atoms in the metal and flying off at high speeds. Like all sufficiently tiny things, those particles obey the laws of quantum physics. But, instead of reading Shakespeare, the subatomic particles in the metal have been listening to the clash. At any particular moment, they don't know whether they should stay or they should go. So they do both. During the time the box is closed, the indecisive lump of radioactive metal will and won't emit radiation. Thanks to these punk rock particles, the Geiger counter will and won't register radiation, which means the hammer will and won't smash the vial of cyanide. So, the cat will be both dead and alive. And this, Schrödinger pointed out, is a serious problem. Maybe an atom can travel down two paths at once, but a cat certainly can't be both dead and alive. When we open the box, the cat will be either dead or alive, and it stands to reason that the cat must have been one or the other the moment before we opened the box. Yet, many of Schrödinger's contemporaries piled on, denying exactly that point. Some claimed that the cat was in a state of dead and alive until the moment the box was opened, when the cat was somehow forced into aliveness or deadness through the action of looking inside the box. Others believed that talking about what was going on inside the box before it was opened was meaningless because the interior of the unopened box was unobservable by definition, and only observable, measurable things have meaning. To them, worrying about unobservable things was pointless, like asking whether a tree that falls in the forest makes a sound when nobody's around to hear it. Schrödinger's concerns about his cat weren't weren't swayed, there we go, that'll do, by these arguments. He thought that his colleagues had missed the point. Quantum physics lacked an important component, a story about how it lined up with the things in the world. How does a phenomenal number of atoms, governed by quantum physics, give rise to the world we see around us? What is real at the most fundamental level, and how does it work? Yet Schrödinger's opponents carried the day, and his concerns about what was actually happening in the quantum world were dismissed. The rest of physics simply moved on. Schrödinger was in a minority, but he wasn't alone. Albert Einstein also wanted to understand what was really happening in the quantum world. He debated Niels Bohr, the great Danish physicist, over the nature of quantum physics and reality. The Einstein-Bohr debates have entered into the law of physics itself, and the usual conclusion is that Bohr won, that Einstein's and Schrödinger's concerns were shown to be baseless, that there is no problem with reality in quantum physics because there is no need to think about reality in the first place. Yeah, no, I'm going to trip up over their names every time. I'm so sorry. Yet, quantum physics is certainly telling us something about what is real out in the world. Otherwise, why would it work at all? It would be very difficult to account for its wild success if it had no connection to anything real in the world. Even if a theory is simply a model, surely it's modelling something and doing a reasonably good job of it. There must be something that ensures the predictions of quantum physics come to pass with phenomenally high precision. But figuring out what quantum physics is saying about the world has been hard. This is, in part, due to the sheer weirdness of the theory. Whatever is in the world of the quantum, it is nothing familiar at all. The seemingly contradictory nature of quantum objects, atoms that are here and there at the same time, radiation that has both been emitted and remains latent in its source, isn't the only alien aspect of the theory. There are also instantaneous long-distance connections between objects. Subtle, useless for direct communication, but surprisingly useful for computation and encryption. And there does not appear to be any limit to the size of object that is subject to quantum physics. Ingenious devices built by experimental physicists coax larger and larger objects to display strange quantum phenomena almost monthly, deepening the gravity of the problem with that no such quantum phenomena are seen in our everyday lives. These phenomena aren't the only challenge to deciphering the message of quantum physics. They're not even the largest challenge. Despite the fact that every physicist agrees that quantum physics works, a bitter debate has raged over its meaning for the past 90 years, since the theory was first developed. And one position in that debate, held by the majority of physicists and purportedly by Bohr, has continually denied the very terms of the debate itself. These physicists claim that it is somehow inappropriate or unscientific to ask what is going on in the quantum realm, despite the phenomenal success of the theory. To them, the theory needs no interpretation, because the things that the theory describes aren't truly real. Indeed, the strangeness of quantum phenomena has led some prominent physicists to state flatly that there is no alternative, that quantum physics proves that small objects simply do not exist in the same objectively real way as the objects in our everyday lives do. Hang on a minute. Yeah, just shift a second. I'm going to go shut our window because the neighbours are talking. They're probably drunk. I mean, come on. Yeah, it's incredibly rude of them. How dare they have fun? Okay, sorry. You can curl back up now. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea where I was. Okay. These physicists claim that it is somehow inappropriate or unscientific to ask what is going on in the quantum realm, despite the phenomenal success of the theory. To them, the theory needs no interpretation because the things that the theory describes aren't truly real. Indeed, the strangeness of quantum phenomena has led some prominent physicists to state flatly that there is no alternative, that quantum physics proves that small objects simply do not exist in the same objectively real way as the objects in our everyday lives do. Therefore, they claim it is impossible to talk about reality in quantum physics. There is not, nor could there be, any story of the world that goes along with the theory. The popularity of this attitude to quantum physics is surprising. Physics is about the world around us. It aims to understand the fundamental constituents of the universe and how they behave. Many physicists are driven to enter the field out of a desire to understand the most basic properties of nature, to see how the puzzle fits together. Yet, when it comes to quantum physics, the majority of physicists are perfectly willing to abandon this quest and instead merely shut up and calculate, in the words of physicist David Merman. Yeah, he sounds pretty funny. More surprising still is that this majority view has time and again been shown not to work. Despite the popular view among physicists, Einstein clearly got the better of Bohr in their debates, and convincingly showed that there were deep problems that needed answering at the heart of quantum physics. Simply dismissing questions about reality as unscientific, as some of Schrödinger's opponents did, is an untenable position based on outdated philosophy. And some dissenters... I lost where I... Whoa. And some dissenters from the majority have developed alternative approaches to quantum physics that clearly explain what is going on in the world without sacrificing any of the theory's accuracy. The existence of these viable alternatives puts the lie to the idea that we are forced to give up on reality in quantum physics. Yet, most physicists still subscribe to some form of this idea. It's still what's taught in classrooms, and it's still the picture that's usually painted for the public. Even when the alternatives are mentioned, they are mentioned as just that, alternatives to the fault, despite the fact that the theory is entirely unworkable. Thus, nearly a century after quantum theory was first developed, after it has thoroughly altered the world and the lives of every human in it, both for better and worse, we still don't know what it's telling us about the nature of reality. This thoroughly strange story is the subject of this book. You still good? You look very sleepy. I'm sorry the neighbors are loud. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, they do this like at least once a week, so... You know, it's fine. No, it's okay, you stay there, I'm just grabbing a drink. Yeah. There we go. I just didn't want to knock you. You're so cute. Yes, I will carry on reading about the science things. This is an astonishing state of affairs, and hardly anyone outside of physics knows about it. But why should anyone else care? After all, quantum physics certainly works. For that matter, why should physicists care? Their mathematics makes accurate predictions. Isn't that enough? But science is about more than mathematics and predictions. It's about building a picture of the way nature works. And that picture, that story about the world, informs both the day-to-day practice of science and the future development of scientific theories, not to mention the wider world of human activity outside of science. For any given set of equations, there's an infinite number of stories we could tell about what those equations mean. Picking a good story and then searching for holes in that story is how science progresses. The stories told by the best scientific theories determine the experiments that scientists choose to perform and influence the way that the outcomes of those experiments are interpreted. As Einstein pointed out, the theory decides what we can observe. The history of science bears this out over and over again. Galileo didn't invent the telescope, but he was the first to think of pointing a good one at Jupiter, because he believed that Jupiter was a planet like Earth that went around the Sun. After that, telescopes were used regularly to look at everything from comets to nebula, to star clusters. But nobody bothered to use a telescope to find out whether the sun's gravity bent starlight during a solar eclipse. Not until Einstein's theory of general relativity predicted just such an effect, over 3 centuries after Galileo's discovery. The practice of science itself depends on the total content of our best scientific theories, not just the math, but the story of the world that goes along with the math. That story is a crucial part of the science, and of going beyond the existing science to find the next theory. That story also matters beyond the confines of science. The stories that science tells about the world filter out into the wider culture, changing the way that we look at the world around us and our place in it. The discovery that the Earth was not at the centre of the universe, Darwin's theory of evolution, the Big Bang, and an expanding universe nearly 14 billion years old containing hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. These ideas have radically altered humanity's conception of itself. Quantum physics works, but ignoring what it tells us about reality means papering over a hole in our understanding of the world, and ignoring a larger story about science as a human process. Specifically, it ignores a story about failure, a failure to think across disciplines, a failure to insulate scientific pursuits from the corrupting influence of big money and military contracts, and a failure to live up to the ideals of the scientific method. And this failure matters to every thinking inhabitant of our world, a world whose every corner has been reshaped by science. This is a story of science as a human endeavour, not just a story about how nature works, but also about how people work. Yeah, that was the introduction. You want me to start the prologue? Yeah? This one's called The Impossible Done. Yeah, good prologue. Okay. John Bell first encountered the mathematics of quantum physics as a university student in Belfast, and he was not happy with what he found. To Bell, quantum physics was a vague mess. I hesitated to think it was wrong, said Bell, but I knew it was rotten. The godfather of quantum physics, Niels Bohr, I think that's wrong, but it's fine, talked about a division between the world of big objects, where classical Newtonian physics ruled, and small objects, where quantum physics reigned. But Bohr was But Bohr was maddeningly unclear about the location of the boundary between the worlds. And Werner Heisenberg, the first person to discover the full mathematical form of quantum physics, was no better. Bohr and Heisenberg's approach in quantum physics, known as the Copenhagen interpretation, named after the home of Bohr's famous institute, was pervaded by the same vagueness that Bell had found in his quantum physics course. Shortly before Bell graduated from university in 1949, he stumbled upon a book by Max Born, another architect of quantum physics. Born's book, Natural Philosophy of Cause and Chance, made quite an impression on Bell, especially the discussion of a proof by the great mathematician and physicist John von Neumann. According to Born, von Neumann had proven that the Copenhagen interpretation was the only possible way of understanding quantum physics. So either the Copenhagen interpretation was correct, or quantum physics was wrong, and, given the wild success of quantum physics, it seemed that Copenhagen and its vagueness were here to stay. Bell couldn't read von Neumann's original proof himself. It had been published only in German, which Bell didn't speak. But after reading Born's description of the proof, Bell got on with more practical things than his concerns about the Copenhagen interpretation. He went to work on Britain's nuclear energy program and put his doubts about quantum physics aside. But in 1952, Bell saw the impossible done. A new paper shattered his short-lived complacency about the problems of the Copenhagen interpretation. Somehow, despite von Neumann's proof, a physicist named David Bohm had found another way to understand quantum physics. How? Where had the mighty von Neumann gone wrong, and why hadn't anyone seen it before Bohm? Bell couldn't answer these questions without reading von Neumann's proof, and by the time von Neumann's book was published in English 3 years later, life had intervened. Bell had gotten married and gone off to Birmingham to get his PhD in quantum physics. But Bohm's paper was never completely out of mind, Bell said. I always knew that it was waiting for me. Over a decade later, Bell finally returned to it and made the most profound discovery about the nature of reality since Einstein. That was the prologue. So, you're still awake a little bit, aren't you? Yeah. Okay, well there's part 1, chapter 1 of part 1, which is only a couple pages. 7 pages long, so I can start that if you'd like. Yeah. Okay. Love you. Okay, part 1, A Tranquilizing Philosophy, and chapter 1, The Measure of All Things. 2 great theories shook the world and shattered the earth on the first quarter of the 20th century, scattering the remains of the physics that had come before, and forever altering our understanding of reality. One of these theories, relativity, was developed in true science fiction fashion by a lone genius working in splendid isolation who had left the academy only to return triumphant with profound truth in his hand. This was, of course, Albert Einstein. The other theory, quantum physics, had a more difficult birth. It was a collaborative effort involving dozens of physicists working over the course of nearly 30 years. Einstein was among them, but he was not their leader. The closest thing this disorganized and unruly band of revolutionaries had was Niels Bohr, the great Danish physicist. Bohr's Institute for Theoretical Physics in Copenhagen was the mecca of quantum physics in its infancy, with nearly every big name in the field for 50 years studying there at one point or another. The physicists who worked there made profound discoveries across nearly every field of science. They developed the first genuine theory of quantum physics, found the underlying logic of the periodic table of the elements, and used the power of radioactivity to reveal the basic workings of living cells. And it was Bohr, along with a group of his most talented students and colleagues, Werner Heisenberg, Wolfgang Pauli, Max Born, Pascual Jordan, and others, who developed and championed the Copenhagen interpretation, which rapidly became the standard interpretation of the mathematics of quantum physics. What does quantum physics tell us about the world? According to the Copenhagen interpretation, this question has a very simple answer. Quantum physics tells us nothing whatsoever about the world. Rather than telling us a story about the quantum world that atoms and subatomic particles inhabit, the Copenhagen interpretation states that quantum physics is merely a tool for calculating the probabilities of various outcomes of experiments. According to Bohr, there isn't a story about the quantum world because there is no quantum world, there is only abstract quantum physical description. That description doesn't allow us to do more than predict probabilities for quantum events, because quantum objects don't exist in the same way as the everyday world around us. As Heisenberg put it, the idea of an objective real world whose smallest parts exist objectively in the same sense as stones or trees exist, independently of whether or not we observe them, is impossible. But the results of our experiments are very real, because we create them in the process of measuring them. Jordan said when measuring the position of a subatomic particle such as an electron, the electron is forced to a decision. We compel it to assume a definite position. Previously, it was, in general, neither here nor there. We ourselves produce the results of measurement. Statements like these sounded ludicrous to Albert Einstein. The theory reminds me a little of the system of delusions of an exceedingly intelligent paranoiac, he said in a letter to a friend. Despite his crucial role in the development of quantum physics, Einstein couldn't stand the Copenhagen interpretation. He called it a tranquilizing philosophy, or religion, that provides a soft pillow to the true believer, but it has so damned little effect on me. Einstein demanded in an interpretation of quantum physics that told a coherent story about the world, one that allowed answers to questions even when no measurement was taking place. He was exasperated with the Copenhagen interpretation's refusal to answer such questions, calling it an epistemology-soaked orgy. How eloquent of him. Yet, Einstein's pleas for a more complete theory went unheard, in part because of John von Neumann's proof that no such theory was possible. Von Neumann was arguably the greatest mathematical genius alive. He had taught himself calculus by the age of 8, published his first paper on advanced mathematics at 19, and earned a PhD when he was 22. He played a crucial role in building the atomic bomb, and he was one of the founding fathers of computer science. He was also fluent in 7 languages. His colleagues at Princeton said, only half-jokingly, that von Neumann could prove anything, and anything he proved was correct. Von Neumann published his proof as part of his textbook on quantum physics in 1932. There is no evidence that Einstein was even aware of this proof, but many other physicists were. And for them, merely the idea of a proof from the mighty von Neumann was enough to settle the debate. The philosopher Paul Feyerabend experienced this firsthand after attending a public talk given by Bohr. At the end of the lecture, Bohr left and the discussion proceeded without him. Some speakers attacked his qualitative arguments. There seemed to be lots of loopholes. The Bohrians did not clarify the arguments. They mentioned the alleged proof by von Neumann, and that settled the matter. Like magic, the mere name of von Neumann and the mere word proof silenced the objectors. At least one person did notice a problem with von Neumann's proof shortly after it was published. Greta Hermann, a German mathematician and philosopher, published a paper in 1935 criticizing von Neumann's proof. Hermann pointed out that von Neumann failed to justify a crucial step, and thus the whole proof was flawed. But nobody listened to her, partly because she was an outsider to the physics community, and partly because she was a woman. That's just wonderful, isn't it? Oh, I hate that so much. Despite the flaw in von Neumann's proof, the Copenhagen interpretation remained totally dominant. Einstein was painted as an old man out of touch with the rest of the world, and questioning the Copenhagen interpretation became tantamount to questioning the massive success of quantum physics itself. And so, quantum physics continued for the next 20 years, piling success upon success without any further questions about the whole at its heart. Why does quantum physics need an interpretation? Why doesn't it simply tell us what the world is like? And why was there any dispute between Einstein and Bohr at all? Einstein and Bohr certainly agreed that quantum physics worked. If they both believed the theory, how could they disagree about what the theory said? Quantum physics needs an interpretation because it's not immediately clear what the theory is saying about the world. The mathematics of quantum physics is unfamiliar and abstruse, and the connection between that mathematics and the world we live in is hard to see. This is in stark contrast with the theory of quantum physics replaced the physics of Isaac Newton. Newton's physics describes a familiar and simple world with 3 dimensions, filled with solid objects that move in straight lines until something knocks them off their paths. The math of Newtonian physics specifies the location of an object using a set of 3 numbers, one for each dimension, known as a vector. If I'm on a ladder 2 meters off the ground, and that ladder is 3 meters in front of you, then I could describe my position as 0, 3, 2. The 0 says that I'm not off to one side or the other, the 3 says I'm 3 meters in front of you, and the 2 says I'm 2 meters above you. It's fairly straightforward. Nobody runs around deeply worried about how to interpret Newtonian physics. But quantum physics is significantly stranger than Newtonian physics, and its math is stranger too. If you want to know where an electron is, you need more than 3 numbers. You need an infinity of them. Quantum physics uses infinite collections of numbers called wave functions to describe the world. These numbers are assigned to different locations, a number for every point in space. If you had an app on your phone that measured a single electron's wave function, the screen would just display a single number, the number assigned to the spot where your phone is. That is incredibly rude. Where you're sitting right now, the wave functionometer might display the number 5. Half a block down the street, it would display 0.02. That's what a wave function is. At its simplest, a set of numbers fixed at different places. Everything has a wave function in quantum physics. This book, the chair you're sitting in, even you. So do the atoms in the air around you, and the electrons and other particles inside those atoms. An object's wave function determines its behavior, and the behavior of an object's wave function is determined in turn by the Schrödinger equation, the central equation of quantum physics. Discovered in 1925 by the Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger. The Schrödinger equation shows that wave functions always change smoothly. The number that a wave function assigns to a particular location never hops instantly from 5 to 500. Instead, the numbers flow perfectly predictably, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and so on. A wave function's numbers can go up and down again, like a wave, hence the name, but they'll always undulate smoothly like waves do, never jerking around too crazily. Reading is getting hard. You want me to carry on, baby? Baby? Okay, you're asleep. Why are you so very cute? This is completely unfair. You're not allowed to be this cute. I'm gonna put that down. Okay. Well, now what do? I can't exactly carry you to bed with my noodle arms. Oh yeah. I'll just grab the emergency blanket off the back of the sofa. Cuddle up. Good night, baby. Sleep well.